The Warhammer world is a dangerous place. Terrible monsters and foul sorceries claiming the lives of thousands on a daily basis. Yet despite this, men manage to scratch out a living even in the harsh realm of Sylvania, fighting every day just to survive. Mankind's greatest strength in such places is their sense of community, bonds of blood and fellowship giving them courage through even the most trying of times. Yet all too often these ties are fragile things, easily shattered in a single night by horrific events. Sadly, however, it is the survivors who typically suffer the most, lonely creatures left to face a world overflowing with despair. The average soul is ill-prepared for such a trial, easily fracturing and giving birth to something altogether more sinister. It is in such a monstrous way of life that true monsters are born, such as in the case of the necromancer Helman Gorst. Originally, Gorst was the youngest of 5 siblings from the village of Tempelhof in western Sylvania. He was a farrier and groom, just like his father, his love for danger and the open road well known among his community. Helman would leap at any opportunity to deliver messages to Ulfheim in the west, or Vassal in the south. However, one day he returned from his adventures, to find his brothers and father dead in their beds, having been taken by the plague of blue roses. Fungus bruises covered their pale bodies, and spores hung heavily in the air. A dangerous disease, the plague of blue roses would turn those it infected into agonizing hosts, who upon their death would launch spores into the air. Gorst was unable to accept the loss. At first he attempted to contract the plague himself by embracing his brothers, hoping to join them in Mor's realm. But it would not take him. With crippling loneliness infecting his mind and despair growing, Helman turned to the one option he had left. He committed himself to studying the dark arts, hoping beyond hope to find a way to bring his beloved family back to life. Word of Gor's studies reached the local peasantry, and, in due course, the ears of the witch hunter von Corden. Seeking to end the distraught boy before he became a true threat, von Corden set out to kill Gorst immediately. The witch hunter rode into Tempelhof, declaring he had arrived to burn the young necromancer. Fearing for his life now that he was so close to bringing his family back, Gorst fled his home and hid amongst the corpses in a nearby plague pit. He patiently waited in the pile of bodies to avoid von Corden's wrath, as the hunter rode off to search for his fled prey. Helman knew he was no longer safe here, so he loaded his brother's corpses onto a cart under the cover of darkness. He lashed it to a pair of famished oxen and fled deep into nearby Vargravia in hopes of escape. It was in that forsaken realm that the wanderer encountered Manfred von Carstein. Normally, the Grave Lord would simply have butchered anyone who wandered into his realm, but he saw a powerful madness growing in Gorst's eyes. So instead of killing him, Manfred took him as a student and began to teach Helman the secrets of necromancy. He even gifted a book known as the Liber Noctis to him, a powerful tome of unholy magic. It was no longer a desperate adventurer that answered to the name Helman Gorst, just as it was no longer oxen that drew his cart along the dirt roads of Sylvania. Instead, his bone-rigid carriage is pulled through the night by the same 4 siblings he rescued from his village, each once handsome farrier restored to a mockery of life, and forced to stumble along at the head of their brother's unliving host. The necromancer set about his work for Manfred immediately, helping coordinate the attacks of ghouls around the province to steal all of Sylvania's sacred relics and have them buried deep in the dark forest where no one would find them. Yet it wasn't long before a true mission would finally be given to Gorst. Von Carstein tasked him with taking a fallen tower crucial to their success, by the name of Constein. The once abandoned fort had been recently retaken by men loyal to the witch hunter von Corden. Eager to please his new master, the corpse master led his small legion to overwhelm the defenders. We'll save the first battle of Constein for the famous battle section. After successfully taking the fallen keep, Gorst set about turning it into his new lair. It would provide him a small base to study his unholy tome and launch assaults at incoming threats to Manfred. What he did not expect, however, was the rather swift arrival of his nemesis, von Corden, who not only had a contingent of men, but also a cannon. Unwilling to give up without a fight, the necromancer summoned his unliving host to him and moved to engage the Empire's soldiers. The battle was a swift but bloody affair as the two forces clashed. The cannon proved to be rather problematic as it smashed entire ranks of undead to ruin and provided the living with the extra power they needed to overwhelm zombie and skeleton alike. Irritated, Gorst ordered his personal corpse cart into the fray, his deceased brothers tearing his foes apart as the small bell on the back signaled that the end had come. It proved to be a futile charge, however, as a blessed bullet from von Corden's pistol punched straight into Helman's shoulder. Wounded and outnumbered, he hastily ordered a retreat, turning to flee east towards Manfred. Thankfully for the necromancer, luck was on his side as some Strigani riders arrived and charged into von Corden's forces. Relieved at this development, Gorst quickly made his way from the fighting, even as he heard Volkmar the Grim arrive and crush the horsemen. Von Carstein's servant quickly arrived at the fortress of Schwarzhofen to report to his master. The vampire received the loss with surprising amusement, for his trap to capture Volkmar was finally in play. Gorst humbly took his place at the Gravelord's side and helped lead his undead army against the faithful warriors of Sigmar. Here he battled until the Vampire Count's legion was crushed thanks to a very timely intervention by Balthazar Gelt. The Supreme Patriarch enacted a great ritual, which caused all of Sylvania's religious relics to burst from the earth and form a gleaming barrier of faith around the cursed land. This development shattered the magic binding the undead, causing all of them to collapse near instantly, and those who didn't, such as Gorst, were subsequently butchered by the men of the Empire. Most likely, it was on the outskirts of Schwarzhofen that the necromancer met his end at the hands of von Corden. Of course, despite his apparent death, Helman can rest easy knowing the sacrifice of his army allowed Manfred to achieve his true goal, as no matter where anyone looked, Volkmar was nowhere to be found. Before we conclude the history of Helman Gorst, it should be noted that he is one of the many circumstances in that it's actually rather uncertain what happened to him. His final noted appearance was at the Battle of Schwarzhofen, so it seems relatively safe to assume he died there along with Manfred's entire horde. However, he may well have escaped to live another day, perhaps even joining Nagash's legions when the great necromancer returned in the end times. It cannot be said for sure what happened. That being said, it is most likely he perished that day. Now that we've covered the Ken Razor's history, it's time to take a look into his equipment. Gorst's only actual piece of magical equipment is the necromantic tome given to him by Manfred von Carstein. The Cursed Book is an ancient book on necromancy written by the mad necromancer Har-Ak Iman, rumored to be the most depraved man to have ever lived. His vileness radiates from the Cursed Book, draining life and energy from all nearby living beings. Each page contains a powerful curse that can cripple and demoralize those nearby. Though, once read, they fade from sight until the light of Morsalib is cast upon them. Utilizing this tome, Gorst is more than capable of drawing additional power from his own life to read from the Cursed Book. Each curse contained within is more than capable of turning the tide of battle, for as curses debilitate his enemies, the necromancer invigorates his own followers with necromancy. Truly, this provides a powerful combination on the field of battle. On top of this, while most necromancers struggle to defend themselves on the front lines in battle, Gorst is a rare exception to this rule. Helman is pulled into the fighting atop his corpse cart, drawn by his raised brothers, whom are actually quite a bit more powerful than the typical zombie. This is likely due to Gorst pouring massive amounts of dark magic into his brothers, as the reason he turned to necromancy was to restore them to life. While unlife might not be quite what he had in mind, the necromancer has succeeded in granting them horrific strength for shambling corpses. Even as the brothers Gorst tear enemies limb from limb, however, this carriage also provides another crucial element to Helman's army. Acting as a magnet to dark magic, it draws power from the land itself to animate nearby undead with a frenetic vigor. With a determined caster holding the reins to such a weapon, it's no wonder that Gorst is so terrifying at the center of his force. So long as he can continue to draw the winds of magic to him, the Necromancer remains a dire threat to all who oppose him. That about covers the equipment used by Helman, so let's discuss skills. Unlike most of the infamous villains leading the armies of the vampire counts, Helman Gorst is pretty young. Still a young man by all accounts, the Necromancer has proven to be an excellent student in regards to the dark arts. He received only a couple years worth of experience before functioning as a lieutenant to Manfred against the likes of von Corden and Volkmar the Grim. An impressive feat when most of his comrades have been learning for decades, if not centuries. Another important note about Gorst is that he's extremely resourceful when utilizing his necromancy. The lad is nowhere even close to being the most powerful necromancer, even excluding the legendary prowess of the likes of Heinrich Himmler. Yet for all he lacks in power, he makes up for in clever tactics. Gorst relies on combining the various skills available to him to put his enemies at a huge disadvantage. He weakens them with the Cursed Book, pushes his own troops into a frenzy thanks to the Corpse Cart, designed his brothers' risen bodies to be powerful melee combatants so he could remain on the front line, and he has the typical power of a middling necromancer to boot. So while he might not be the next Van Hal, the boy has certainly proven he's a capable servant of the vampire counts. With that, let's go ahead and move on to his famous battle. The first battle for Constein. Gorst approached the ruined tower riding upon his ghastly cart, the single eerie bell atop its back tolling mournfully in the night. The necromancer paused as he pulled into full view, for by the light streaming out of the window, it was clear the ruin had occupants. It was easy for him to hear men's voices drifting upon the wind, soldiers who served the weak Empire, no doubt. As Gorst considered his options, however, he heard a name drift upon the breeze that filled him with hate. Von Corden. So these cretins served the witch hunter, did they? In that case, they truly did deserve to be torn apart. Calling upon the winds of magic saturating the land, Helman summoned his minions, who were already close by. The men in the tower fell silent, as piercing howls filled the air. Next came lurching in the Tithe, a rather large contingent of zombies still armed with the weapons they once wielded in life. The soldiers of von Corden quickly came charging out of the tower, shouting in alarm at the sight of the zombies, but not giving in to fear. They knew that to lose the tower meant tempting the wrath of the witch hunter, which no man willingly embraced. They had been given strict orders to ring a bell of alarm at the top of the tower to signal for reinforcements. A small group broke off from the main line, forming up against the undead, and ran to fulfill their duty. They never made it. With a gesture from Gorst, a monstrous pack of direwolves launched out of the darkness. They set upon the isolated troops with slavering jaws, and tore them limb from limb with brutal strength. The dire pack's charge was utter carnage, and had effectively cut off the soldiers' retreat. Still, however, they held their ground against the necromancer, determined to try and kill him if nothing else. Cackling, Helman ordered the brothers Gorst to take him towards the fray, even as the first of the Tithe charged. The zombies were powerful for their kind, but still just mere puppets, and easily held off by well-trained warriors. The faithful servants of von Corden fought with righteous zeal, circling up so not to give the dire pack another opening. Had the battle continued in this fashion, perhaps they might have lived. However, just as Gorst's corpse cart reached the battle line, he unleashed a powerful incantation from the Liber Mortis. The air screeched as dark magic rippled into the ground below, and something began to stir. The men of the Empire cried out in despair as skeletal hands shot up from beneath them, scratching at legs and clutching feet. The Constein stalkers had risen. As the ancient skeletons pulled themselves out of their graves, they disrupted the soldiers' formation. This created openings Helman fully intended to exploit. His brothers pulled themselves into the conflict, tearing out defenders' throats even as the cart's magic spurred the undead to violent action. The dire pack poured in, pouncing on screaming men before crushing their heads between snapping jaws. With this madness unleashed, the formation completely collapsed, and only a matter of moments was it over. As the last man fell with a skeleton spear lodged in his chest, the young necromancer took a moment to enjoy his work. These men had fought bravely to stave him off, so clearly they deserved a just reward. So did Gorst raise his arms in gleeful satisfaction, with the winds of magic swirling around him. He spoke the words, and with a whispered scream, all of the dead soldiers began to twitch. The tithe could always use some replacements, after all. Alright, and that wraps up the famous battle for Helman Gorst, the first battle of Constein. So normally this is where we would move on to the end times segment. However, for Helman Gorst, there was no end times. Helman featured primarily in the prequel to the end times, which is the supplement known as Sigmar's Blood, and he presumably died in the final battle of that novel, so he never appeared in the end times, so we don't have to do that section. So, with that out of the way, now we will move on to the final section of each video, which is the Total War chat. So, Helman Gorst was a bit of a surprise coming into Total War Warhammer. So far, up until him, they had been very strongly featuring characters who were prominent leaders, and at the very least were lord choices in their respective factions. This particular expansion, The Grim and the Grave, opened up a lot of interesting things, because first of all, we got Vlad von Carstein, who was a character I would have never expected to be resurrected for Total War, as he was very long dead and was not really a premier character within the lore up until the end times started again. Or started, rather. The Gorst, however, is in a more unique position in that he was quite literally a barely named side character in a campaign that not a lot of people played, because Sigmar's Blood was separated from the end times, being a lead up to it. He was literally a level 2 necromancer that had very specific abilities. He was very limited in what he was capable of doing. He was actually debatably worse than the average necromancer, since he actually was not capable of raising the dead in the way they designed him. The Brothers Gorst corpse cart was impressive as far as corpse carts go, but Helman himself was just kind of a side character to Manfred, just like von Corden was a side character to Volkmar. But Helman was not a special character. He didn't really have any unique special abilities. The only thing really interesting about him was that his corpse cart was 1 strength higher than the average corpse carts. And he was a hero. Previous to Helman Gorst being included in the game, I never ever expected Creative Assembly to pull out a hero choice as a legendary lord. I expected heroes to feature as a legendary hero, some kind of hero that you would pull out of a maybe like a legendary quest battle you'd fight, and if you won it, you would get the hero or accomplish some very dizzying set of objectives, and you would get a hero who would, if he died, would always come back, and had like narrative things, and they even had like quest battles or some stuff. But in any event, or I guess instead of quest battles, they would probably have like quest objectives. That would probably make more sense. In any event, Gorst obviously is the exception to this rule. I don't know if this means that any hero is viable, like if we're going to see the likes of Krell as a legendary hero, or another good example would be Ludwig Schwarzhelm, or any of those hero characters, Grim Berlikson from the Dwarves book, or Snackla Grobspit from the Greenskins. It seems that all of the all of the regular heroes have been sort of placed into this do not use category for now. Obviously, Krell is the most famous example, who we will talk a lot about in the Heinrich Himmler video, which is on my docket. Though I intend to do some other guys before I come back to the vampire counts. That being said, I like Gorst a lot. He's a very interesting character. If you have not played him, his special ability is that he gives his entire army poison. I don't know why he does that. He just does. That's a campaign ability he has. He also increases your troop replenishment rate, map worldwide, for the entire Vampire Counts faction, which is excellent and synergizes extremely well with the Undead. Another thing I kind of like about his poison attacks is that it encourages you to run an Undead army with him. One thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Crypt Ghouls and Crypt Horrors are not actually undead, technically. They're living, like they're alive. They just tend to flock to dark magic, and they have kind of a weird relationship with many undead creatures. But with Gorst, it's actually pointless to take Crypt Horrors or Crypt Ghouls, because they're one of their biggest things is that they have poison attacks. But with Gorst, your entire army has poison attacks, so you're much better off taking things that can really benefit from that, because it allows them to really drag the enemy down, such as tar pits like zombies, and then having your elite units, of course, wielding poison like Blood Knights and Graveguard. That being said, I would say that I was a little disappointed with Gorst's design, as they kind of made him out to be, I think, more powerful than they should have. I would have preferred Gorst to center around zombies. I think his design in many ways accented that, but I think what would have been very cool is if any zombies joining his army got buffed to represent how he made the Brothers Gorst more powerful, because Helman's whole thing is that he's good at zombies. Like, that's what he does. He's not the zombie master, because that's Dieter Hellschnitt's thing, but I would have liked to see that be his focus, because Dieter Hellschnitt will never be playable. There's no way. There's so many characters that would come before Dieter. But it would be... I would have much preferred to see him have, like, a bonus for zombies and have the regular raise dead ability. I think the fact that they gave him the ability to raise whites and did not give that to Himmler was very, very peculiar, seeing as in tabletop... Gorst can't even raise the dead. Like, in his actual lore story, he is incapable of raising the dead on the battlefield. Like, the famous battle I stole, I said there's not technically a lore function for it. You actually play the battle between von Corden and Gorst, but everything else is left very nebulous, and the reason they do that is because they want you to play through it, so they wrote the narrative in a way that regardless of who won, it still makes sense, which left it really vague. But we have to have a famous battle section, so so he did successfully take the Tower of Constein, but it was left very vague, so we decided to fill it out a little. In any event, Gorst is a very fun character, and most importantly, he opens up a lot of really interesting possibilities. Also, another note that I need to make that's very important is that some of you may have noticed that when I was describing Gorst's equipment, I talked about the Cursed Book, which was written by another necromancer, a very powerful necromancer, but a necromancer. A lot of people do not realize that Gorst in the lore does not actually have the Liber Noctis. He's not at all associated with the Liber Noctis, which is actually one of the 9 books of Nagash. In Total War, when they decided to upgrade him to a lord, they gave him a more appropriate magic weapon, being the Liber Noctis, which functions surprisingly similar to the Cursed Book, but it was actually made by Nagash. But of course, when you play Total War, the Liber Noctis has pages missing, and Gorst's entire questline is getting all the pages back and re-imbuing the Liber Noctis with its former power, so that you're able to use it to its full effect. Which all it does is that it kills Gorst, it does damage to Gorst and gives you more magic, which is how the Cursed Book sort of works. Anyway, I just want to thank all of you guys for watching. I hope you have a great day, and if you enjoy the lore on Helman Gorst, you might consider coming by and checking out my Total War Warhammer playthrough of a Gorst campaign. You might find that enjoyable. So in any event, please take care of yourselves. I will be back fairly soon with another lore video, and until then, have a good night.